Welcome to the 15th episode of Sense with Science, your weekly dose of sensible, science-driven information about all things COVID-19. We're coming to you live on Facebook as well as on Astro Awani, thanks to Pusat Purobatan Naluri. With you today is co-series founder, Professor Dr. Adiba Kamurazaman, infectious diseases specialist from University of Malaya. You may ask what happened to our series founder, Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud, advisors to the Prime Minister of Malaysia on Public Health. Well, she and our good friend Maisara are in the boondocks of Johor at the moment. They are in a kampung, reaching out to the town folk there, speaking about vaccination and checking out the lay of the land. So for today, they might pop in if they can and if their internet connection is stable enough. But if not, you will have the dynamic duo of myself and Professor Adiba, as well as our very special guest today, Dr. Chan Yoke Fun, Head of Department of Medical Microbiology, University of Malaysia, and colleague to Professor Adiba. So welcome to the show, Dr. Chan.
Hi. Thank you for the invitation.
We're very glad that you are here available for us today. All right, so the specialties of medical microbiology and infectious diseases are a hand-in-glove partnership. So Adiba, in layman's terms, can you please explain how specialists like you... Oh my gosh, it's Dr. Jim!
Yeah, hi!
Hello! Hi!
We are in Sungai Malang, and can you see behind me, there is a...
Yeah, we can see the Star Wars.
Oh, hang on. I gotta change my.
Wallpaper.
Background. How do I change my background?
Okay, I love that about Dr. Jim. Dialogue.
Okay, you can see behind me. There's a bus. Can you see?
Yes. What's that bus for, Dr. Jim?
So we're doing mobile vaccinations, kampung by kampung.
Oh wow, that is so cool.
So you see the bus?
Yes.
Yeah. So we've been in Johor this weekend, doing mobile vaccinations inside the elderly care homes, and then at the Pasada PPV, and now chasing the bus that's going from place to place to vaccinate. So I just thought I would drop in to say hello, and of course say hi to all the profs there.
One prof.
Yeah. Hi. That's true.
Hello. Thank you for being on the show.
It looks hot out there.
It's an honor.
It's very hot. Yeah, it's very hot. So,
Dr. Jim, how many people have you vaccinated today?
Oh, today I've been vaccinating a lot of the elderly in the old folks home. It was really nice. I did it with Mercy, KKM, and the St. John's Ambulance.
Lovely.
Yeah, so now this is, there's some wonderful people here from KKM.
Hi.
Yeah. She's the Pegawai Kesihatan Daerah Muar. So she's been doing this whole service, which is amazing. Prof. Adiba is there.
Kita bincanglah HPV ya.
So yeah, so it's been good. I mean, this is the only way, right? We got to get, for those who cannot come to some of the hospitals or PPVs, we go to them, and then we run this service. But I was really happy when we went to the old folks home, so it was really good, and they were all quite incapacitated, so it was really good to be able to go there. Okay, let's get on with the show.
All right, thank you for dropping by, Dr. Jim. Feel free to keep your camera on and give us blow by blow as you go. Okay.
Okay.
I'll start again then. So Adiba, this one's for you. The specialties of medical microbiology and infectious diseases are
right, as you said.
Yeah. So
as you said,
what do you and Dr. Chan do together?
Okay, so as a clinician who sees patients with infections, my colleagues and I rely very, very heavily from Dr. Yoke Fun and her team, because, you know, when we take specimens, whether it's the COVID specimen or blood specimen, we send it to Yoke Fun's lab to see if we can grow anything. We can, using molecular methods, as in the SARS-CoV-2 virus, detect them. So, you know, they're our, well, we work hand in hand, and microbiology is butter to infectious diseases bread. Without them, we're useless, you know, in terms of making a diagnosis, choosing the right antibiotic for treatment, choosing the right antiviral. Yeah. So they make the diagnosis in the lab, we make the diagnosis in the wards, and hopefully we agree.
Hopefully, right? Okay, so I really love how this time of pandemic has introduced us to so many kinds of specialists that we would never have hitherto known about, you know? So who would have thought that, you know, there are such rock stars among you guys? So heading into the show, we're discussing the variants of COVID-19 today. So Dr. Chan, set some groundwork for our viewers, please. What exactly is a variant? And do all viruses have variants? And then how do these variants come about?
Right. So we know that SARS-CoV-2 virus is actually an RNA virus. So RNA virus actually changed over time more commonly compared to a DNA virus. So as a whole, you know, if a virus basically, it's actually a parasite. So it actually lives within a host. So the host can actually be you, me, which is human, or it could be animals, or in the lab, we actually grow them in cells. So with that, you know, as the virus replicates, what it does is actually it makes copies of itself, and then it changes over time. So it changes bit by bit, and that's where it's actually called mutations. And with that, this is actually a very common phenomenon in actually a virus. So it happens in all viruses, and whether it can be fast or slow. So for example, in SARS-CoV-2, it's not considered fast compared to, you know, virus that we know, virus that Prof. Adibal works on, HIV. HIV is pretty fast, and for SARS-CoV-2, it's relatively, you know, quite slow. But these mutations, sometimes, you know, where they change a little bit, it actually helps them to grow better. And these mutations are the ones that actually help them to survive and reproduce as well. So what happened is virus actually take this opportunity when they mutate. It can help them to spread, and when it spreads to a host, a human, it gets to replicate more, and then with that, over time, you know, you get to see more and more mutations, and then that results to a variant. So that's how, you know, when a virus accumulate, you know, a certain numbers of mutations, that's when we call it a variant.
Okay, so a variant is a mutation. Can we use both terms interchangeably?
So basically, it's kind of true what you say, but specifically, you know, what happened is that you know, mutations are actually, you know, genetic changes in the virus. So for example, let's go back to say 18 months ago when we first discovered the virus, SARS-CoV-2, and that's actually from the first virus that we found in Wuhan. And so now over time, 18 months passed, and we saw that, you know, the virus that we have now actually have accumulate certain mutations. So these cumulative mutations make it a variant. So basically that's how, you know, the term, yes, you can call it a mutant or you can call it a variant. So that's more accurate, I would say.
Okay, so the CDC, the Centers of Disease Prevention, Control and Prevention, has a variant classification system that defines 3 classes of SARS-CoV-2 variants: a variant of interest, variant of concern, and variant of high consequence. Can you walk our audience through these and what these terms mean, please, Dr. Chan?
Okay, so as you say, CDC and CDC has recently put that variants into different perspective, so that we kind of get into the same level of alert. So for example, the word variant of interest, or VOI in short. So it's basically these viruses actually carry certain genetic markers. So when we actually say genetic markers, it means that it's actually sequence of the virus. So it can actually have certain proteins, certain mutations that actually, associated with, for example, helping the virus to actually get into the cells better. It helps in binding to the receptor. It helps to actually, what happened is these variants will actually have reduced binding to antibodies, which are very important to actually protect us. It actually could reduce treatment efficacy. It can actually potentially have impact in diagnostic, and it can actually perhaps, known to be actually increasing cases and outbreaks and so on. However, when you say interest, it simply means, they have these characteristics, but we are yet to know whether they are of actually, they can move on to become a variant of concern, which is actually subsequently, from more and more studies and with time, we actually found evidence. The keyword is actually evidence when you actually look at variant of concern, because they actually, again and again, we found that, they have evidence that they increase in transmission, they cause more severe disease, which is increase in hospitalization and death. They actually definitely, escape certain, with the mutations they have, they actually do not bind to antibodies so well. And with that, they escape certain treatment. And we also know they may have actually certain, they may cause reduced effectiveness in vaccine. So with that, there are evidence of such, and therefore they are named variant of concern. So the other one, which thankfully is called variant of high consequences, we have not identified any at the moment, but the classification for that is actually basically that, it simply means catastrophe, okay? So it actually simply means that it has impact in all the medical countermeasures that we have. If failed diagnostics, we cannot detect it. We have to use various methods to be able to actually find that it's actually, this is actually SARS-CoV-2, but it has changed so much. And then it significantly, reduce therapeutics. And of course, more importantly, it will cause more severe disease. So thankfully, at the moment, we have identified a couple of variant of interest and various variant of concern, but not variant of high consequences yet.
That sounds very, very scary. And I really hope there will not be.
Yes, we do hope we will not actually have one, yes.
Yeah, it sounds terrifying. Adiba, can you help our public understand which are the variants Malaysia is looking at right now?
So I think the one that currently has captured everyone's attention is, of course, the B1617, the Delta variant, the Delta Indian variant, right? Because of what we're seeing happening in the UK in terms of the rapid increase in cases. We, I think, thus far have not got a extensive surveillance for variants in place. Yoke Fun, correct me if I'm wrong. And what we know about our variants are coming from small studies from IMR and from our own hospital. So that may not give us a true picture. For instance, at PPUM, and Yoke Fun will be able to confirm this further, I think one of our concerns is that we're seeing more of the Beta, which is the South African type of variant. But that's unique, that could perhaps be unique to our hospital because we're seeing more Zika cases. So what I'm trying to say is we haven't got a full picture of what's happening here in Malaysia, and I believe, Yoke Fun, feel free to jump in, that we need a much more systematic way of keeping track of these variants.
Is there no system currently in place that keeps track of this, Adiba?
I think we're trying, but it's probably not caught up, you know, with the speed of the pandemic in the country, because it's really quite laborious work. You know, it's not like you know, you take the swab, you detect the PCR and, you know, the RNA. There's a lot of steps that needs to come in to then name a particular isolate as this or that variant. So it takes a lot of resource.
All right. And who would be the government body who will take care of this, that kind of thing? You know, like in America, the CDC will take care of this, and, you know, they will classify the variants, and they will basically take control of that database. Is any authority or any faculty in charge of this particular thing at present moment?
I think IMR would be the obvious place, with support from, you know, labs like ours and others that are doing this kind of work.
Right.
That technical side, maybe you find you might want to jump in.
So if I may add on, it's so to date, that's a database, international database called GIS-8, that actually collects over 2 million of genome sequences of SARS-CoV-2. So basically, a lot, of course, are contributed by UK, because they actually make a very big consortium, and they sequence quite like 5% of all isolates they get every day. So that's really a big effort. CDC is actually ramping up, so they also do their own sequencing, because now the world actually realized that, you know, without knowing what variants comes in, you know, you can't control your outbreaks and so on very well. So so in Malaysia, besides IMR, a few other universities have actually ramped up efforts. One, of course, is our University Malaya, and the other one that have been doing quite a lot is actually UNIMAS. So, and apart from that, you know, some others, a few other centers would have actually deposited. We deposit all our sequences basically not locally, but into this GIS-8 database, which I told you about. So it has 2 million sequences, and immediately once you put it in, what you can actually see is, it's very amazing. You can see, you know, oh, your virus is now same as, you know, many other viruses that is in UK or in US and so on. So it will give you a big picture of whether what you deposit is actually completely normal or is actually currently circulating elsewhere. So I give you an example. It's last year when we did our studies on the genetics of SARS-CoV-2. What we did was we found out, you know, that our viruses is from one lineage is called B6, and then, you know, that lineage is actually from last year March to May. It was actually in, you know, ASEAN countries such as Singapore, Indonesia, and so on. So thankfully, you know, that variant did not I would say that lineage did not make it to a variant in other countries, because I think that time, you know, we have very strict lockdown, very strict closing border and so on. So it did not actually escape to other parts of the world. So with this year, just to reiterate, you know, Prof. Adiba's answers to the variants that we know of. So in our studies of detecting variants, so there are two ways to actually do that. We can now a commercial company has made some, you know, good PCR that, can detect specific variants. So we have actually done that, and we found that, since February, we actually see, February, we have a few variants, in our studies, and then we see more in March, and then we see more in April and May. So now in just a random studies that we have, we found that, 50%, almost close to 50% of our samples are all actually the beta variant. So we actually see how all these, these variants can actually, overwhelm the existing strain that is circulating. So that's, again, studies that we have to ramp up, across the country, because what we have is only pictures in our hospital. So we hope that we'll see more data, from nationwide soon.
Okay. So should we be afraid of variants? Will they wreak as much havoc as the original COVID-19?
Okay, maybe I can take this one. I think we don't want to be alarmists, but at the same time, I think it's very, very important that we have a sense of what's going on, what's circulating, because as Yoke Fun referred to, what these variants mean is, first of all, I think it, like I really need to refer to what the Alpha, the UK variant, is associated with the increased transmissibility. That means, more infections. That's the signal we're also seeing with the Delta, the B1617. I'm still going to have to, until I get used to it, I'm sorry, I have to still refer to the countries. So one is because you may see more that you see more infections because it's more transmissible. So that is the reason why we need to be concerned with variants. Number two, the beta, the South African one, has been associated with more severe disease. We're still not, I think the studies on the Delta with regards to severe disease is still not conclusive. There is some suggestion that perhaps even the Alpha one also may be associated with more severe disease. But all this, all these are results are just coming through. So, we need to keep a close watch on it. So in terms of its effects on the infection and the outbreak and the clinical disease. The other main reason why there's so much interest on the variants, of course, what it does to the effectiveness, efficacy of the vaccine. Especially we know that the beta one, the South African, didn't, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine didn't fare so well. The AstraZeneca vaccine didn't fare so well compared to, the infections with the non-variant type. So this is the other reason why in terms of vaccine effectiveness. And then of course, if you have been infected with one variant type and you have bad luck and infected with another variant type, whether your immune system will, be strong enough to prevent you from getting an infection from the second variant. So those are the reasons why we have to keep a very close eye on these variants. Then once we know what's circulating and all that, I think manufacturers of vaccines will have to make the proper adjustment to their vaccine makeup.
Okay, so which leads on to a very pertinent question and something that our viewers on Facebook are already asking about. Do the current vaccinations offer any kind of protection from any or all of the variants? It's a very broad question, I know, Professor Adiba, but maybe you can do your best with Yoke Fun to shed some light on this one.
Sorry, I was looking at the question in the chat. Say that again, sorry.
Well, basically, I'm mirroring the question in the chat that says, our viewers want to know if the current vaccinations will protect us from all variants, and if they do protect, what kind of level of protection are we looking at? And is it possible that some of the vaccines might not work as well as others in facing one or other variants?
Yeah, so, you know, from what we know thus far, you know, the vaccines with the highest efficacy, the mRNA vaccines, have, you know, what we call, you know, good space in terms of even if you know, it's less effective, so to speak, because, you know, you need 60–70% efficacy. The vaccine is so powerful that it will be able to overcome some of the variants. But, you know, all vaccines have different level of efficacy, and these are things that we are just starting to learn from studies. Nevertheless, I think, you know, it's said that you need a minimum of 50% efficacy of the vaccine to overcome the infections, at least to reduce the severity of the disease and to reduce death. What we know thus far is in sort of real world studies, there is evidence that the vaccines still work. But then, you know, we need to keep a close eye on all of this.
Yeah. So yeah, if I can add on. So I was at the one of the WHO workshop, which actually put together you know, quite a lot about variants just last Thursday, I think. So what was all the data does suggest, you know, that the current variant that we have, the variant of concerns, such as alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. At the moment, most studies actually still showed that, you know, vaccines are still effective against all these variants. However, you know, there were a few you know, that the level could be different, because what we know is other than delta, you know, delta's Delta variant does not have mutations of, you know, that actually mutate the neutralization. So with alpha, beta, gamma, it actually changed the neutralization sites. So with that, you know, it's likely, you know, that the effectiveness of these variants towards vaccines may be different. So that is the data we have, for sure. And the second is based on so far, you know, live real effectiveness. There have been shown some drop in neutralization and some drop in you know, effectiveness. But overall, the data seems to say that, you know, that the vaccine is still effective. And of course, you know, worldwide, you know, some of these manufacturers, they are actually already talking about having boosters, just like, you know, what all a booster vaccine, which may be needed, whether it's actually against the variants or against the original virus. So far, I think they have presented some data on if they actually use the original virus as, you know, that you get a booster. It is still good because you will actually get enough of immune response to actually fight the variant. So the other thing that is possible is that that we can actually, other than booster, it's actually make new vaccines, which is against variants. So that is actually not difficult for mRNA as well as adenovirus-based vaccine. The last thing that is possible that, you know, that you know, with scientific data, we know that some of these vaccines not only just produce neutralization response, but they produce, for example, we know Sinovac, for example, it's a inactivated vaccine. So it will actually give you, you know, protection against other parts of the virus. So with that, perhaps, you know, we think that there may be some protection against the variant as well, because most of the time the variant's mutation site is actually at the spike. So if you actually you know, take a vaccine like Sinovac, which has, you know, the whole virus, you may still have protection towards other parts of the virus. And so with that, you know, you will still see a certain level of effectiveness of the vaccine. So with that, you know, only with time we can have data, and that will tell us. So at the moment, we should be concerned, but at the moment, not to be alarming, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the other thing I want to add to what Yoke Fun has just said is that our immune system is a very, very complex thing. And, you know, when you vaccinate, it's not just about producing antibodies. There are other parts of the immune system, like the T cells and others, memory cells, T memory cells and others that, you know, we hope when it encounters the next infection, will get, you know, will be activated and respond accordingly. So it's not necessarily just about, you know, a mix and match thing. It's about, you know, really priming the entire immune system with the vaccine that, you know, will hopefully respond with the next infection, even if it's with another variant. Yeah. It's incredibly complex, but it's incredibly powerful as well.
I think the most important thing to underscore here is what Tan Sri Jamila and Professor Adiba have always said on the show. Any vaccination is better than no vaccination. One shot of prevention is worth a lot more of conspiracy theories and naysaying. And right now, with the question of variants, it's really, really important more than ever to have as many people vaccinated as possible. So we have questions on the chat, and feel free, Yoke Fun or Adiba, to take this one. A viewer writes, based on a study, both AstraZeneca and Pfizer vaccines were only 33% effective against the Indian variant, the Delta, 3 weeks after the first dose. They want to know whether this efficacy is against symptomatic disease or against severe symptoms and death. Could you shed some light on that, if you know that particular study he's referring to?
I'm to be honest, I'm not familiar with this study. So, yeah.
Okay. Yoke Fun, do you have any insight on this one?
I have not heard about, unfortunately, I do not know what is this study. However, I think by far, most studies that did all the comparison with variants are actually very small numbers, because basically apart from the UK variant, okay, alpha, okay, so just rephrase it, it's alpha variant, okay. Apart from, more data came out from alpha variant, which actually emerged as early as last year, and that shows that, you know, all the vaccines are still good. You know, the effectiveness is still good for alpha variants. I think Delta variant is something very new, and even there's a study, it will be very, very small numbers, and I'm not so sure the studies actually what is the primary objective outcome, whether it's symptomatic and severe, but so far what I have read all about, you know, all this vaccine effectiveness, whether in clinical trial or real world, what we know is, of course, it definitely has been protecting against severe symptoms and death, and that's actually no doubt about it. So I can't comment what is the you know, findings of the studies against what actually.
All right, that's fine. No worries about that, Dr. Chan. Just a note to our viewers, if you're going to cite a study, can you please cite it in its full, or at least give us a link in your chat box so we know which study you are referring to and we can have a look at it before we put our specialists on the spot. It's unfair to just cite a study without the citation of the study and a link towards that study. There are many, many studies made by many, many people. Not all of them are people that we trust, nor are they people that we trust to be completely neutral in their information gathering and their sample size, as well as the reason for the study. So just a little note for our viewers. So coming back to the question of variants, Adiba and Dr. Chan, how many cases of a variant must a nation have before it is classified as a variant of interest or concern? Is there already an agreed standard for this?
It's not about the number of variants. It's, I think, about what impact it has on those things that we've been discussing, on transmissibility, on the clinical disease, and also on the vaccine efficacy. Then it gets classified accordingly. It's not how many viruses you've isolated belong to which variant. Okay.
Why do some variants do better in some countries than others? Well, maybe better is not something that I would say, but how come some variants thrive or seem to be more prevalent in certain countries than others? Is there something in the climate of a specific nation which causes a specific mutation, Dr. Chan?
Actually, we know that all this, whether it's a variant or it's actually the original virus, it spread when we provide them the chance to. So like I already said, virus actually lives in the host. The host is us, the humans. So when we actually allowed it to spread, it will take the chance. So for example, how it spreads is actually when we actually loosen up our social and public health measures, we give opportunity for, the virus to spread. So, and how fast it spreads, of course, it depends on how many, how, like we have 1,000 people gathering and things like that, so then the potential of spreads is way higher. So it is actually mainly, and the other thing that whether it's related to climate, of course, we know virus lives better in the sense that when it's actually cold, because that makes them very stable. But generally, the virus, the mutations are actually not related to climates. So the mutations actually basically are more related to, like what I just said, we give them chance to mutate, and then they start mutating the genes, especially the spike, and that mutations in actually the protein called S spike, which we use to make the vaccine, okay? And this actually mutations in the spikes, for example, once they change, it helps them to bind better to the host cells, to the human. It actually helps them to, avoid our immune system, our antibodies in our body. So with that, the virus, when it enters us, it actually replicates way faster. And when it replicates way faster, it transmits even faster to other people. So, it's a whole cascade of, from inside the cell to actually, you as the host, and subsequently at the population level, it actually spread. So it's actually, that's how, the virus actually thrive to survive. So yeah. It has nothing to do with really, countries or so on.
Okay, I get you. I mean, short of thinking of in a very sympathetic way of, the virus as an organism as its own struggling to survive, but it's still a fight for us. It is a fight for survival for both the humans and the virus, and right now it's looking pretty scary, honestly. moving along, the World Health Organization just 2 weeks ago released a statement that said it had new guidelines to prevent stigmatizing countries or communities by naming variants after the places of origin. So this comes on the back of a lot of criticism from the Indian government about referring to one of the mutations as the Indian variant. So what happens is that the variants of the COVID-19 virus are now named after letters of the Greek alphabet, with the Indian B16172 variant of concern, now known as the Delta variant. So Adiba, I know you have the chart with you. As a member of the World Health Organization Science Council, can you expound a bit on this a little bit more, please? This way of thinking, as well as the steps that have been taken to do this.
Yes, I think that the primary reason is, to not associate these variants with a particular country, and which then leads to stigmatization and discrimination. In fact, the choice of the Greek letters, I'm not quite sure why the WHO took that. I've not read into it enough. But it was also to simplify things. I don't know, I'm one of those people who have trouble remembering numbers. And so, as Yoke Fun said at the beginning, those numbers signify something, but to those who study viruses, I think for the rest of us, it suffices to kind of remember these alphabets. But we're going to soon run out of alphabets, I think, as keep mutating. In fact, I read somewhere that, we may have to move from Greek to another classification if they keep mutating.
That is terrifying. Are you saying that the WHO is...
I'm not saying this as a WHO Science Council. No, I'm just saying that, so hence we need to get control of the infection through, all the public health measures as well as vaccination.
I mean, this is terrible. We've already gone on, we've already used up 6 of the 26 alphabets. So under the new naming system, variants first discovered in the United Kingdom, the B117, South Africa B1351, and Brazil P1 will be known as Alpha, Beta, and Gamma, respectively. So the next 6 letters of the Greek alphabet have been used to name other variants of interest, including those that were first found in India, the United States, the Philippines, and Brazil. Right, Yoke Fun?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Tita or something like that.
Yeah. So in the recent past, the only use of the system has been to name the variants of the H1N1 flu, commonly called the swine flu, with the other subtypes H1N2, H3N1, H3N2, H2N3 are found commonly in the pig populations all over the world, correct? So is there a need for us as lay people to use these terms, the beta, the alpha, the beta, the gammas, and so on and so forth? Do you think it is important for us as lay people to already understand the polarizing effect that calling a variant, the Indian variant or the South African variant, has on communities and people, or from those communities and nationalities? Okay, that was off script, yes. But, I just wanted to hear that from 2 medical professionals, because you guys deal on with things on a very scientific level. And this question that I asked is probably more of a social psychographic kind of issue. What do you think, Prof? Do you think that it should be the case that lay people learn to use these the Greek names for these variants?
I think yes, and that's the reason why they've been named so, to reduce the stigmatization against countries, etc. But I really am not sure with this whole COVID-19, I think every citizen has become scientists, from, talking about R0s to modeling to, which is great. I think the interest in science hopefully has increased, but how much a lay person needs to be tangled in knowing the intricacies of the variants is because to the individual person, it's not really going to affect so much. I mean, I was asked the other day by a patient, if I get COVID and when I get tested, do you actually test the variant as well? And the answer is no, not we. So we don't do it, for every patient because it doesn't sort of impact in terms of treatment. So I think it's good to know which variant is circulating in your country because of all those effects it has, like what we just discussed on the vaccine, on the disease transmissibility, and keep a watch on what's happening to the pandemic. But at the individual level, I'm not quite sure that the variants have that much of a direct effect.
Okay.
I think it's good to know science, but it's actually not required by, I think, the public. I think it is mainly, I feel if you are in the medical profession, that will help you to be alert, on making public health measures and so on, if you are actually at the policy maker stage. But again, at in future, if we see, for example, in the whole country, for example, in like what we know, in the alpha variant, it just dominate UK as a whole, and now UK are seeing mainly Delta variant. So with that, you will really see a replacement. So whether you want to actually know exactly which variant, I don't think at the end it's important if it doesn't actually affect treatment or affect your public health measures and so on. And I think it remains something good to know. I think public shouldn't I must remember, South African, it's beta and so on. So I think that's not necessary.
Yeah, okay. It's more important at, I guess, policy level and in terms of choice of vaccine and all of that. But like I said, to the individual. In contrast, a very related issue which doesn't get talked about much, which is antibacterial resistance, right, Yoke Fun? So, we have infections with bacterial organisms. SARS-CoV-2 is obviously a virus. The other calamity that has come upon us is this widespread problem of bacterial resistance. In that situation, it is very important for someone like me to know if you're infected with a bacteria that has drug resistance, because then the choice of antibiotic there and then makes a huge difference, whereas the virus variants don't behave in that same way, or the actions that we need to take are not at the bedside, so to speak.
Okay. Right. So I know that Drs. Chan and Professor Diva have said that we don't have enough work, we don't have enough information on the particular workings of these mutations, because there's not enough of a database, there's not been enough studies. But do you have, Dr. Chan, a broad overview of the different characteristics of the variants most seen in Malaysia? Would you say that the Delta or the Indian variant, presents in a certain way, different from the regular COVID?
So at the moment, we only have the genetic data. We have not really actually correlate with any potential severity or vaccine effectiveness and also transmission at the moment. However, if you actually see the data we have already in 18 months, for example, initially we have the B lineages, and then subsequently now we have the variant of concern, the beta and the alpha coming in. So of course now with alpha and beta, since I think January onwards, we actually seen bigger number of cases compared to what we saw last year. So whether that is associated with what we already know, increased transmission, I think those data has to be put together, and then we would be able to actually say, with these new variants that comes into Malaysia, and therefore we are similar like what is seen in other places like in UK or in other parts of the world. They actually see increase in cases. So we haven't really put the data together, I must say. However, seeing our numbers increasing, of course, I would hypothesize as a virologist, I would hypothesize, I think it's likely, because we actually have a new variant, and therefore, that leads to our spike in cases.
Okay, I understand. So one of our listeners want to know, do viruses generally mutate to become less deadly but more contagious?
Actually, the general theory of how virus survive is actually, it's true that virus, they want to survive. So that's how nature makes them. And to survive, they must make mutation that benefits it. And, to benefit it, it may just stay in the host happily and just quietly transmit to another person. So for example, we know other respiratory viruses such as, common cold rhinovirus, we get it every month. For me, it's every month I get a common cold. So they are very good. So they just survive, by making into 100 over different types of rhinoviruses, and then they just pass, quietly, and you just get sick for a little while and then you recover. So similarly, I think we would expect, COVID-19 to happen that way as well. Hopefully, that it will, from a pandemic, that can be actually eradicated, or not eradicated. Potentially, if we actually have enough of, population being immune, then we'll see lower numbers, or may perhaps, if we can reach a herd immunity, we would eventually see, the virus get eradicated. If the virus don't get eradicated, we may actually see, the virus become endemic, and meaning that, the virus will just stay like common cold. We'll just get the virus, sick for 1-2 days, and then after that we are well again. And that fits into really, how virus leads to survive. They mutate, but generally the mutation, it's not lethal to it. It's not deadly to virus. It actually can help it to actually spread more often. And of course, that's their survival skill.
Okay, so mutations don't normally mean they're worse than the original virus generally. It does mean that they mutate in order to better survive in a host.
I think we also have to know, sometimes virus is a gamble game, right? I mean, they grow, sometimes they also make mutations that do not benefit them, so it's not all the time they win the race. They actually get mutations that actually bingo, I actually spread, so it's actually virus do actually make mutations that actually harm them as well, and therefore they would not be able to be as fit, and then if they are not fit enough, they will not actually continue to spread. So that is how we also see, some of why, you see all these variants that, one SARS-CoV-2 lineage is actually being replaced by another virus. For example, like what we see earlier, I think in last year, September to December, we actually have a different lineage in Malaysia. But beginning this year, we are already being, the virus SARS-CoV-2 that is actually circulating has already been replaced by the variants of concern. So you can see the variants of concern is one example that the virus mutate and have an advantage and became more contagious.
Okay, understood. Professor Adiba, we spoke about this a little bit earlier on in the show. Can you help us understand vaccine-wise what it takes to develop extra layers of protection from variants? And would scientists need to reformulate the makeup of the vaccines to protect us even further?
Yeah, so, I'm no vaccine expert, but it does, those people who are developing the vaccines will need to understand where the mutations are occurring and where, the proteins that they're designing the vaccine, where the target areas are. And so they definitely do need to modify the makeup of the vaccine. And as you know, there are many different types of vaccines. So technologies. So we're keeping all these people on their toes by having to adapt the vaccines according to the changes that we're currently seeing. And I believe that it's already happening. Some companies are already, some vaccine manufacturers are already in the process of tweaking their vaccines to cater for these mutations that we're seeing. And not just for one particular variant, but I guess the ideal would be to combine the vaccine that will take care of all the main variants that we're seeing by tweaking the parts of the vaccine that will recognize these changes.
Yeah, so there are a few ways that I think the vaccine company are doing it. So first is they will tweak their current vaccine to incorporate variants. The other option is actually to give a booster of what existing. And it seems that I think studies are already ongoing to actually test that out on a clinical trial. And so again, the third possible, I think studies that people are doing are actually to look at if other parts of immunity other than antibody will actually protect. So if, we have seen, for example, studies from a paper, Science Immunology, which shows that, people with previous infection of COVID, all you need is just one dose of vaccine. So because, they would actually accumulate enough of, antibodies similar to or someone who would get 2 doses. So with that kind of scientific data, we should be able to actually fight the variants because I think we just have to be a little patient to wait for the data. But at the moment, if you actually have the opportunity to take the current vaccine, do go and take it because at the moment, data has not suggested that it's actually totally, it's not effective against the variant. So I think that it's what we need to remember. All current vaccine is still good and can protect, you to a certain level.
Words from the wise.
Yeah, and in addition to that is that the fewer people who are left unvaccinated, the less likelihood that the virus can infect these people and therefore propagate. And it's when they have this chance to propagate that the mutations occur. So hence, the need to get as many people vaccinated.
Yeah, so the science of vaccination is very mysterious. It's not just you, it's just not me or Prof. Adiba get vaccinated. It's actually, it needs a collective effort. So we need to actually stop to, people who are carrying the virus, so that, all a group of actually people who are vaccinated to actually, protect one or two people that did not manage to get vaccine. So that's actually called herd immunity. So we actually need as many people to be vaccinated, and therefore, the virus will not get a chance to be actually contagious. Without being contagious, they will not mutate. So it's actually a whole cycle kind of thing. If we as the host stop that process by getting a vaccine, then we actually indeed stop the virus from mutating. So I think that's really efforts has to come from us as well.
I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Chan. Definitely. I think to a lot of people, they see it as just being an individual act of responsibility to protect myself. Sometimes a bit selfish as well. It's individual, it's selfish. They don't realize that together, collectively, is what makes the difference. It's what's going to turn the tide. Mass vaccination and an increased herd immunity is the only thing that at the end of the day is going to stop this scourge. So apart from vaccinations, are there additional measures that we now have to take as the public to shield ourselves from the variants? Is there anything else that we need to know that we haven't already been doing in the course of these 18 months of pandemic?
Masking, distancing, the whole kit caboodle. Yeah.
Nothing has changed then?
Nothing has changed.
No add-ons then?
No add-ons.
Okay, so it's business as normal, folks, or business as abnormal as the case might be. So
there are suggestions that in terms of double masking, for instance, that might offer added protection. My concern with this is that it's quite uncomfortable to wear it for a long time, the double mask, and that some people may just wear it for a while and then take it off because they're uncomfortable. So one has to balance. Yes, it offers more protection, provided you keep it on all the time.
Understood. I've also seen an increase in the number of people wearing a face shield on top of their masks. Is there science to this, Prof. and Dr. Chan?
I don't think that has been really studied, yeah, the face shield.
So it's just possibly for a greater peace of mind from an individual point of view.
I would think so.
Yeah.
All right. So how will these new mutations change the nature of the pandemic, Dr. Chan? Is there any way that the evidence of new mutations is going to change the way we are going to treat or face down to this pandemic?
So just like influenza, of course, we initially thought, influenza will be the pandemic virus. So we have put in a lot of effort to actually monitor influenza. So now that we have a coronavirus pandemic, so in future, I think we will also put a lot of effort in making sure, we actually do proper virus surveillance for coronaviruses or any other potentially zoonotic, which means, the virus that actually has an animal reservoir, animal as the host. So, so we know that, some of these coronaviruses can jump from, animal bats or any other animals to actually human. So it's actually important to actually, check and do a virus surveillance to make sure, we know what is on the ground. I think, this pandemic has taught people like virologists like us, actually we really need to think ahead of the virus. For example, rather than being passive, we need to be actually actively, like I say, look out for all these, potentially pandemic virus. We actually need to be a lookout for variants. For example, we do not want any of these variants become high consequences. So therefore, ensuring this virus to not actually, for example, if it's at the imported level, we need to make sure it doesn't escape and gets into the population. We need to have social measures to ensure, it doesn't spread in the population. So I think, monitoring all these viruses, for example, like what Prof. Adiba earlier said, for example, at the laboratory level, we can actually, sequence the virus. We can actively do that, to make sure we know that, there's a certain population is increasing in certain variants is increasing. So we then need to figure out, is that variant of interest, of concern, or of high consequences. With that, I think we can act faster rather than, when we heard someone reporting that, oh, there's a variant of interest, then only we look out for the variant of interest. That's already way too late. So I think, let's all work together to be ahead of the virus.
So Karen, there are a couple of questions on should we be reducing the dosing intervals to improve the effectiveness of the vaccines against the Delta variant. Well, first of all, I have to say that I don't think we have the complete picture in Malaysia whether the Delta variant is the predominant variant in this country. Like we said, what we're seeing at PPUM is the Beta variant, yeah? So what is important, I think, before the Jawatan Kuasa vaccine make these major decisions, because it has all kinds of implications. If you shorten the duration of the vaccine, it needs to be matched with the supply that's coming in for, the next round of people to be vaccinated, and so forth and so forth. So I think these are very important decisions that have to be based on the science, on local, what we call local epidemiology, in terms of not just local epidemiology of the virus and the variants, but also where the infections are and who's been vaccinated. So the short answer is yes, some countries are already taking steps to reduce the interval between the first dose and the second dose, because they know that, there in the UK, for instance, one of the main circulating variants is the Delta, but is Delta really the main virus that's circulating? We need to know all these things in much more detail before we make those changes. It's how I think the approach should be, and not just, simply jump to conclusion.
Thank you for that.
Backing up the wrong tree, and it's another variant that's circulating, which requires a different approach and strategy.
All right, Dr. Chan, we've seen an increased number of COVID cases in children and teens. Do you think it's a new variant affecting children more frequently than earlier strains? Could it possibly be a mutation which has decided that the hosts in young children are better hosts than adults?
So I also have a look at those data, the spike numbers, the number of cases in Malaysia recently. And actually what you can see that, COVID cases actually generate increase in all the age group. So it's not just in young age. And bear in mind, I think, what we are seeing is actually completely increase of COVID cases in all the age group. And so therefore, I don't think we have data to actually say that, currently, the virus, the COVID, it's actually infecting more children in Malaysia. However, UK has actually shown that they actually have more children are being infected. But bear in mind also that, you know, in UK, they have already completely vaccinated the elderly, they have completely vaccinated the middle age group. So what is left is also the young age group. So I think with all these confounding factors and so on, it's actually very hard to say, you know, whether is it true that, you know, current variants actually are the cause of, you know, younger age group. I don't think we have the data to make that conclusion at the moment.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Dr. Chan. Another question. Does the virus mutate more easily in a person with a low immune system?
I think it's hard to say because generally, I think, you know, virus does mutate, you know, it can actually mutate and overcome the immune system. At the same time, when actually, you know, if you put it into a system that do not have strong immune system, the virus will be very happy and it will just grow to massive amount. So in general, that rule is true, that virus can actually grow better, but whether it mutates better, I think, you know, that actually has to be measured, because for HIV, you know, it tends to mutate better in you know, immune cells and things like that.
Okay. Oh, this is this is a little bit of a segue from variants, but one of our Facebook viewers would like to know: is it useful to sanitize the roads, etc.? I saw it in the news recently, as the virus is confirmed airborne.
Definitely not the roads, because you know, when the virus is transmitted out in the outdoors, it gets diluted, and when it falls to the ground, sunlight will eventually kill it. So I don't think we need to sanitize the roads.
Yeah, so actually a lot of studies have not shown, now that we know SARS-CoV-2 is actually airborne. So, you know, whether it's on the surface, you know, it has to be a huge amount to be on the surface, and subsequently really, you probably really touch that huge amount and then, you know, get it transmitted to yourself. Otherwise, you know, it is still really, you know, transmitted through you know, while you talk, while you sing, you know, through you breathe out your breath and things like that. Absolutely. So it's really still respiratory, yes.
All right. So I mean, as long as you don't go around and roll around on the floors of hospitals, you know, your chances of getting COVID from the environment and from surfaces are generally much lower than you would through inhalation and when being around people who are not properly masked and who are not having the sense to keep the 1 meter distance, safe distance, as you know, as we are told to do for the past 18 months. You know, ladies, it's tough not to have anxiety over what I've learned today. And I think that's also why it's so important to have not only medically learned guests on the show, but also women scientists with a talent for compassion and the understanding of the human condition. So before I end, I'm going to ask our doctors to say a few words to reassure the public, you know. So Dr. Chan, as a virologist and a person who's actually looking at how these bad guys mutate, you know, can we first hear from you and tell us something positive? Give us some hope, please, to finish off the session.
I have 3 points to share. I think at the end, you know, APO2 variant, I think not all variant is of concern. That's what very important that we have to remember. And vaccine is still effective. And, you know, the second thing is virus is a parasite, so it co-evolve with us, and we can stop the spread through social measures. You know, all we know it's, you know, hand washing, wearing masks, social distancing, ventilation, avoid crowded places. So all those strategies and all those public health measures still work on any variants. And of course, you know, at the moment, since vaccine is available, we have to act. We have to actually, you know, vaccine is definitely a critical tool to actually ensure that, you know, we can beat the virus.
All right. Professor Adiba.
Agree with all those things. And I think the most important is to make sure that we all get ourselves vaccinated. That's the only way, not the only, that's the main way we can beat this virus.
You know I'm not alone when I say I'm so done with pandemics. We are all chafing under restrictions, and very few among us have not been touched by COVID in one way or another. At times when things feel really dark, this is when I think it's very important to let the sense of science speak, as opposed to listening to unfounded rumors on WhatsApp, to, you know, YouTube videos challenging different norms and ways of keeping safe, you know. So it's really important now that to understand that, you know, pandemics come, pandemics go, and we as the human race, we still remain. It is very important for us to note that this too shall pass. And it's very, very important for all of us to continue to listen to the science and to shed our own positive light. So we'll wrap up our session on variants now and hopefully go forward with renewed hope. So thank you, Dr. Chan, for sharing your experience with us today. Any final remarks on your side, please?
Get vaccinated. Remember, it's not to just protect yourself, but protect everyone else.
Awesome. And Professor Adiba?
Ito.
Okay.
Get vaccinated. Yeah, get vaccinated. Yeah.
Words from
help those around you to get registered and get vaccinated as well.
That is a great point. Yes, I think it's very, very important that we look at the community around us and we single out the ones who are a little bit tech inept, the older ones, the ones who do not have access to the technology that allows us to make our appointments online and to just register them as a vaccine dependent on your phone. You don't have to be necessarily a blood kin. You can just register them to help them out. And that would be really, really good for you, for your sense of community, and for the care that you give to the person that you're doing this for. So this has been Sense with Science, a community education project brought to you by Pusat Perubatan Naluri and streamed live via Astro Awani. I'm Karen Michaela Tan, wishing you peace in this time of upheaval and reminding us all to be kinder every time, every way we can. See you next week, same time, same place, and stay safe in Malaysia.
Thanks everyone. Bye.